Embattled Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is calling for stricter regulation of the web, including his own company. In an op-ed published in the Washington Post over the weekend, Zuckerberg called for more outside regulation in issues Facebook has faced criticism over, including political advertising, hate speech, and user privacy. Over the past few years, Facebook has faced several probes from Congress and other governments over its actions. This included how it handled misinformation on its platform during the 2016 election. Let's bring in Nick Thompson now. He is a CBS News contributor and the editor-in-chief of Wired. Nick, welcome. Great to have you with us. You know, Zuckerberg has defended Facebook since 2016, and the company has made some changes to try and curb election interference. He touches on protecting elections in his op-ed, writing, quote, online political advertising laws primarily focus on candidates and elections rather than divisive political issues where we've seen more attempted interference. Some laws only apply during elections, although information campaigns are non-stop. Now, Nick, he's making some good points, for sure, but is this an attempt by Zuckerberg to dodge responsibility for political messaging on his platform, or is this an earnest attempt to put an end to outside interference ahead of the 2020 election?
Oh, I think it's definitely both. I think he genuinely believes what he's saying in this op-ed. I think the solutions that he proposes, including the one you just laid out, and he goes through 4 different areas of solutions, but the solution he just laid out about how to change laws about political ad accountability makes eminent sense. We have political ad rules that were designed for a different world than the one we live in now, and he's saying that should change. So he does earnestly believe that these would help.
Right.
He also is not unaware that having stricter regulation would lock in Facebook's market position because broadly, Facebook has the capacity to comply with strict regulations. A startup competitor does not. Also, having real regulations would offload some of the responsibility. Right now, when something goes bad on Facebook, everybody looks at Facebook and says, your fault. If there are regulations, things would continue to go bad on Facebook, and Zuckerberg could say, my hands were tied by the government.
Right. And so and if there are going to be regulations, he wants to get ahead of the conversation and be a part of the conversation. I think it's interesting, that point, though, that you made right now, that he's not talking about whether Facebook is too big or Google or any of these other huge internet companies are too big, which is another point of criticism coming out of Washington. He didn't touch that hot topic, did he?
No, and that's, I mean, well, let me put it this way. The thing that scares Facebook the most is antitrust regulation, right? They are very worried that Washington will say, just as you did, Facebook is too big, let's break it up.
Right.
Lots of people are saying that. That would lead them into the morass that Microsoft was in for a decade. That is their nightmare. So what Facebook would like to have happen is a robust conversation about regulation and about how to regulate privacy, but not about antitrust regulation. So if he can steer and have a feisty, good debate about all these other issues and leave that big one to the side, he'll be a very happy man.
Right. And there's no doubt he's making some good points. Another big topic Zuckerberg addresses is how to police hate speech. He writes, quote, one idea is for third-party bodies to set standards governing the distribution of harmful content and to measure companies against those standards. Regulation could set baselines for what's prohibited and require companies to build systems for keeping harmful content to a bare minimum. What do you think of that suggestion?
Well, again, I think that is an excellent suggestion, right? We should definitely have some regulations on toxic content on the internet. It is also a self-serving proposition because Facebook has hired 30,000 content moderators as teams of hundreds of people working on artificial intelligence solutions to knock away toxic content. And so if any company could comply with new regulations on toxic content, it would be Facebook, not a competitor. Right. Secondly, it would mean that if Facebook did its best and followed the rules and something bad happened, they could put some of the blame on the government instead of on themselves. So it's a good proposal. I hope there's less toxic content on the internet. The government needs to pay attention to this stuff, and it's also self-serving.
Right, absolutely. And Nick Zuckerberg says privacy and data protection also need attention. He calls for, quote, a more globally harmonized framework. He says the U.S. should adopt Europe's regulation standards. Remind us what those standards are, and would they be able to translate to the U.S.? I mean, he does make some points that it's sort of hard to have one set of rules for the U.S., another set of rules for Europe, for the rest of the world. The internet is global, right? So at what future point will the entire global community get together about some rules?
Yeah, and that's another very good point, right? So what GDPR is, which is the European privacy regulations that went into law about a year ago, and it says that people should have much more control over their data. They should know what data companies collect. They should be able to withdraw their data from those companies. The reason why, if you travel to Europe, you can't visit a web page without a pop-up, and in fact, even in the United States for a period, you got pop-ups asking for privacy opt-ins, was because of GDPR. And so Zuckerberg would like a world where the rules are more cohesive and understandable, so that Facebook doesn't have to massively shift their operations in every country that they operate in. It would make it much smoother. Secondly, back to the thing I keep saying, GDPR actually seems to have locked in Facebook's market position. It is very hard for other ad networks to compete with Facebook because they can't comply with all of GDPR's regulations.
So that's why they like it
in the
so
last
much,
year,
Nick? Is that why he's a fan?
the market share of advertising controlled by Google and Facebook has gone up since GDPR. It's one of the unintended consequences, which I talked about on CBS at the time the law was being discussed and when it was passed, which is when you pass regulations like this, you give power to the incumbents. And so Europe, which hates the giant incumbents, and a lot of their regulation is aimed at kneecapping them, actually sometimes helps them. But then again, the fact that Facebook will benefit from a rule change doesn't mean the rule change isn't a good thing. So again, Zuckerberg can be self-interested and in favor of something that may have benefits for the whole internet.
He just can't be the only voice out there setting the standards.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct.
All right, Nick Thompson, thank you so much.
Thank you.